shall reign, and we know that He's coming again. He's coming again. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that my Redeemer lives. He's still keeping all His promises. The same Jesus, the same Jesus. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that my Redeemer lives. He's still keeping all His promises. The same Jesus, the same Jesus. Whoa, whoa. He's the first and the last, the beginning and end. At the sound of His cry, all the world came alive, and He formed us from dust, put His breath in our lungs. We were made for His love, but we ran from the light, and He wouldn't give up on His daughters and sons. So He took up the cross, and He laid down His life, and He did what He said when He rose from the dead, and He's coming back again. 'Cause I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that my Redeemer lives. He's still keeping all His promises. The same Jesus, the same Jesus. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that my Redeemer lives. Still keeping all His promises. The same Jesus, the same Jesus. Whoa, whoa. Same Jesus. See the tomb where He lay. See the stone rolled away. He is risen. He is risen. He's alive. See His hands. See His feet. Touch His scars and believe. He is risen. He is risen. He's alive. Oh, He's alive, and He lives. All honor and power are His. All glory forever. Amen. Oh, Jesus lives. Now hear the shackles breaking free. Hear the song of the redeemed. He is moving. He is moving. He's alive. Oh, so take this freedom. Take this love. Can you feel it rising up? He is here. He is here. And He's alive. Oh, He lives. All honor and power
Hello everyone, my name is JC Park and welcome to Venture Online. If you're new to Venture, or if you're interested in getting more involved, we'd love to help you get connected. Head over to venture.cc/connect. We'll reach out to you. There's a place for you at Venture and we welcome you into our family. It's springtime and Easter is just around the corner. We're super excited about Easter Adventure and 2 other events surrounding Easter. First, we're hosting a community egg hunt on Saturday, March 27th here on our campus. I'm so excited to tell you that with more than 2 weeks left, both sessions have been completely sold out. So we just opened up another session to serve 400 more people. I just want to tell you why this is so exciting. For our last community outreach event, Fall Festival, about 40% of the attendees were not Venture members. They just came from our community. Just imagine, this can be the first step for their journey with Jesus. And this time, we're also going to have a chance to share the gospel story through our egg hunt activity. With one more session, we do need many volunteers to host this event with excellence. So head over to venture.cc/Easter to sign up to serve. Friday, April 2nd is Good Friday, and we'll be offering a Good Friday service online, which will be available on demand anytime on Good Friday at venture.cc, YouTube, and Facebook. We'll also have 2 in-person services under our tent outdoors. In-person service times will be at 5:30 and 6:30 p.m. Join us as we pause to remember the sacrifice Jesus made through this special time of worship, teaching, and communion. Sunday, April 4th is Easter Sunday, where we'll celebrate the miracle of Jesus' resurrection. Easter Adventure Online will be available on demand all day on Easter Sunday. We're also having in-person Easter services. Service times are 9, 10, and 11 a.m. and we'll add another service at noon if needed. Head over to venture.cc/Easter to reserve your seats for our in-person Good Friday service and our in-person Easter services. Be sure to invite your friends, neighbors, and coworkers to experience the Easter Adventure either online or at one of our in-person services. Venture family, thank you for your faithful financial support. Your generosity is making an eternal difference in the lives of so many people across our community and beyond. As you can see on your screen, we have secure and convenient ways for you to give. You may also mail your check to the church office. We are in week 2 of our new series, Marvel. But before Tim comes to share the message, let's check out Connie's miracle story.
Hi, I'm Connie, and this is my miracle story. My mom had Alzheimer's, and most people know it's a terrible, terrible disease. Not only do people lose touch with reality and lose their memory, but sometimes it also affects their personality and who they are. And this is something that happened to her. As her Alzheimer's progressed and she was living in her own world, she became very uncooperative and didn't trust us. It became clear that family just could not do all that she needed. We needed to get additional help. So we reached out, and that's when we all discovered that there were some medical papers that she needed to sign, as well as my dad. And she really wasn't in the right reality to be able to do it, and nor was she willing to cooperate and really understand what was going on. So we had a dear friend who's an attorney, and he came over to tell us what we needed to do in this situation. Before he came, I just knew in my heart, I know the Lord. My mom loved the Lord, and I knew that God could touch her. I knew he could do something, and I knew we couldn't. We were powerless. So before our friend arrived, I just went off into a back room, and I just sat at the keyboard and I just sang worship songs and praised the Lord and just got into his presence. And I just asked, Lord, please tell me how to speak to her. Move her heart. Lord, do something so that she can sign these papers and we can get her help. So we got together, the attorney came, signed the papers, my dad signed the papers, and he witnessed it, and then we went into the living room where my mom was. And I just got down on my knees, and she was sitting there, and I don't even remember what the words were that the Lord gave me, but that's what I said. What I do remember is that this woman who had been so disconnected from all of us looked up with such a clarity that I hadn't seen in a long time. And she looked around at everyone till she said, "What do you think I should do? What do you think I should do? What do you think I should do?" And she listened to what they had to say. And there were about 6 other people in this room. And after each person said what they thought she should do, she looked down at these papers. I could see her make the decision, and she signed them. It was just God's hand, a miracle, this clarity in her that hadn't been there in such a long time. And it wasn't too long afterwards that she went back into her world, and actually never did come out of that place until the day she passed. So I have in my heart this passion for the Lord and for praying for people. Well, I love to pray for people at church. I want to see people healed, and I've seen people healed by the hand of the Lord. Jesus is our healer, not just 2,000 years ago. He is our healer today. He touches the very depths of our soul. He's marvelous. He's awesome. He's good. One of my favorite verses is Jeremiah 33:3. "Call to me, and I will answer you and tell you unsearchable things that you do not know."
One that we see, if you look in John chapter 4, John puts a couple of miracle stories back to back. We're going to look at both of them. Because in both ways, Jesus defies the expectations of not only the people that he helps, but also the crowd that's around. Look at the first one. John 4:46, it says, "Once more he visited Cana in Galilee, where he had turned water into wine." Last week we saw him in Cana. He's back again. We don't know if there's something special about this place, but as he comes back into Cana, there was a certain royal official whose son lay sick at Capernaum. And when this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and begged him to come and heal his son, who was close to death. So we've got this royal official. He was either official in Herod's court, or maybe he was part of the Roman entourage. We don't know exactly his title. We just know he's a really important person. He lived in Capernaum. Now, Capernaum to Cana is 20 miles. So when it says that he went to Jesus, he had heard about Jesus, he went to Jesus, this isn't a simple journey. And yet he's a desperate man. He literally goes to beg Jesus for his son's life. Look at Jesus' response. It's a little bit different than we would expect in the next verses. Jesus said, "Unless you people see signs and wonders," Jesus told him, "you will never believe." He's almost a little off-putting at first. He goes, "Man, you just have to see something, don't you?" I love how the royal official responds, though. He says to him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." Now, again, this may not mean much to us, but even the fact that he would address Jesus as sir, you didn't do that as a royal official. I mean, they had a real strong pecking order. You had the royal official up here, and then you had normal people. And then you'd have a guy like Jesus who was pretty poor. He's known kind of as a traveling rabbi. He certainly wouldn't merit the title sir from a royal official. But remember, this guy's desperate. If you had your son and he's dying and you can't do anything about it, and this is the one person in the world that you think can make a difference, you suddenly don't care about your official title. You don't care about the pecking order. You don't care about all the status in it. This guy is desperate and he's humble. And he looks at Jesus and he says, great phrase. Here's this guy. He has nothing else to go on, but he looks at Jesus and he takes him at his word and he departs. he goes. Not in the way that he personally expected it, but in the way that Jesus alone could accomplish it. And remember, the goal of all these miracles that John's teaching them, his goal is that we would read these miracles and we would believe in Jesus. And so he points out, man, not only did this guy believe, his whole household believed as well. And you can look at that and you go, well, is it a coincidence? Did it just happen at 1 o'clock? A lot of times we like to write these things off because we don't know how to explain miracles. Because it's God working in a way that really defies the normal ways that he works. Remember, it's God that sustains our universe. It's God that runs everything with such consistency that we have these laws of nature that we depend on. And when he moves in these ways, and when he moves on our behalf, a lot of times we discount it. I love this guy didn't. It not only strengthened his belief, but also his whole household. And guys, as I've been hearing your stories, and sometimes it's big things that God's done, sometimes it's small things. In all of it, I don't want to just write it off as coincidence. I don't want to ascribe miracles where they may not be, but I never want to rob God the glory of what he's doing. I think of a story Mike Anderson tells of right after he became a Christian. He got a letter from the IRS. They were asking him about some tax returns. And as a Christian, he had to answer honestly that he had lied on those returns. And he said it began a series of painful meetings with the IRS. And he didn't know how it was going to turn out, but he knew God was calling him to trust him. He knew he had to tell the truth. Finally, one of his last meetings, he pulled in front of the federal building there, and the meter wouldn't take his money. He was down to pennies. It wouldn't take pennies. He was already late for it. And just kind of out of desperation, he just said, God, I can barely take care of this without God who accomplishes daily life, much less the miracles. And he does it in unexpected ways. You know, John follows up with another miracle story right back to back. I mean, the very next verses, he starts in John 5. Sometimes later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now, there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. So he's describing the many gates that go into Jerusalem, the sheep gate that was there, and there was this big pool, and the colonnades are like porticos, like shaded columns that would have the shaded area and the people congregated underneath them. And it's interesting, one of the facts, you know, over the years, scholars have doubted these stories. A lot of people, because they have miracles in them, they go, these can't be true stories. And if you looked in the early 19th century, 20th century especially, people went through and they picked the Gospels apart. And they said, this doesn't even match what we know of Jerusalem. There's no pool by the sheep gate, these colonnades and all of this. Until 1964, when an archaeologist was digging and suddenly discovered this huge pool right by the sheep gate. Discovered the foundations for 5 colonnades. I mean, just like the story told it. That's one of the things I love about archaeology, because I know these miracles can be hard to believe. I love that all throughout the Bible, there's always these kind of details. And archaeology has yet, over 2,000 years, there's yet to be a discovery that's disproved the Bible. In fact, the more they dig, the more they find things like this. Jesus came in, and there's this big pool and the colonnade, and all around it, look, here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed, one who had been there as an invalid for 38 years. There was a rumor, we don't know, the story behind it was, in this water, an angel would come down every so often and the water would move, and whoever got in the water first, they would be healed. And we don't know if that's a legend. We really don't know where that story started. Jesus doesn't even address it at all. But all of these people would gather there, and ultimately it became a place where people that were disabled could gather, and they could beg for alms, beg for money. Because remember, there's not a social system per se. The temple took care of them to some degree. But can you imagine this one guy that's there For 38 years, he's been disabled. From what we can tell, he's a paraplegic, couldn't walk. 38 years. 38 years in a culture where there's no wheelchairs. There's no access ramps. There's no ADA. I mean, life was hard already back then. And that much more if you're disabled. As Jesus comes to him, look as it continues. When Jesus saw him lying there and he learned that he'd been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" That may seem like a dumb question at first. Do you want to get well? And the man said to him, the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred." Remember the legend of if when the angel comes down and the water's stirred up? He said, "I have no way to get in. And while I'm trying to get in, someone else gets down ahead of me." So Jesus comes and he looks at this guy and there's compassion for him. But he asks him this question. He says, "Do you actually want to get well?" Now, we might immediately go, well, of course he wants to get well. Don't answer it so quick. Part of what Jesus is determining here, do you really want to experience a different life? Because as much as you can hate the life you're in, sometimes when it's the only life you know, you may think you want to get well, but you really don't. Just the change, the stepping out, the newness of it. I've seen this a lot over the years in counseling. In fact, I've realized the genius of what Jesus is doing here, because sometimes I'll talk to people, the people that are dealing with a broken heart or broken home, dealing with issues in their life. And I'm telling you, get up. And when you get up, go ahead and pick up your mat. You're not laying here anymore. This isn't your life anymore. And it's time to start walking. And in that moment, at once, the man was cured. He picked up his mat and he walked. Now think about how amazing this miracle is. Because in that moment, bones would have to reset. Muscles that had atrophied after 38 years suddenly have strength and function. Nerves that haven't fired. Muscle memory that would have to be there for the brain to be able to tell the legs how to work and how to pick up the mat. I mean, all that happened in that moment of that miracle. It didn't say at that moment he started physical therapy. He began his journey and he slowly learned how to walk. Jesus just goes, hey, let's speed up the whole process. Let's just do it right now. And the guy gets up, and it doesn't say he stumbled, doesn't say any of that. Just he gets up and he's got control and he has function and he picks up the mat and he walks. Now, you would think at this point, man, this is the biggest celebration ever. Way to go, Jesus. I love how John, at the very end of the verse even, he kind of puts this ominous sign. The day on which this took place was the Sabbath. And if there was a soundtrack, you'd kind of hear bump, bump, bump. I mean, it's ominous. You go, wait, why would that be ominous? He just healed a man that for 38 years couldn't walk. Well, look at the very next verse. And so when the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, so they see this guy who's been healed, it's the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. Now again, he's talking about the Jewish leaders, the Pharisees. And remember, God had a set law. There were set rules that the people of Israel were called to follow. And by the way, Jesus kept every one of those. He never broke any of God's laws. But these leaders over the years, they had added rules on top of the rules. In other words, if God's law was here, they thought, you know what, we better have a buffer zone. And so God had said, hey, remember the Sabbath, keep it holy. There's this one day a week where you don't do your normal work. One day a week where you give it to God. One day a week that it's a day of worship, it was a day of rest and refreshment. And they go, yeah, okay, that's good. But we need to, add some more rules to make sure nobody works. And so they came up with all these extra rules about what was considered work or not. And by the way, picking up a mat and carrying it was one of their rules. And so they see this guy and they're like, hey, what are you doing? Who told you could carry a mat? Look at the guy's response. He replied, well, the man who made me well said to me, pick up your mat and walk. I mean, I'm just doing what the guy who just healed me told me to do. And there's a part of this almost humorous, that these guys are so fixated on this rule, they're missing the big picture of what's going on here. And the guy goes, hey, I'm just doing what the guy who healed me told me to do. And they said, who is this that told you to pick it up and walk? Again, they've missed the whole miracle. They don't care about the miracle at all. They just care about, you're carrying this man. Who told you to do it? And the man who was healed, he had no idea who it was. For Jesus had slipped away in the crowd that was there. I mean, he doesn't even know Jesus' name. Jesus is already gone. And so this whole scene is playing out. And again, it's all about these expectations. It's all about what we get fixated on and what we lose sight of. A little bit later, Jesus finds the man. Look at it. It says, later Jesus found him at the temple, and he said to him, and I love this line as well, see, you're well again. Now stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. Now, I don't know what the guy was off to. Maybe he's like, I got new legs, I'm ready to go live. And Jesus goes, hey, fella, there's things worse than not being able to walk. And so nobody healed you just to unleash you. You were healed so that you could follow God with your life. So you don't need to be about that. The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who made him well. And so these Jewish leaders, they come and confront Jesus. Look at the last verses in this story. So because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, look at this, guys. The Jewish leaders began to persecute him. And in his defense, Jesus said to them, my Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working. Now, I love this response. So they find out it's Jesus. They come up and they go, hey, are you the one that told him to pick up the mat and walk? Notice again, they've totally lost sight of the miracle. Totally lost sight of the fact that, by the way, in the Old Testament, you know, one of the major signs of the Messiah is he makes lame people walk. It's supposed to be this flashing light that should show them that Jesus is the Messiah. But instead of seeing the flashing light, all they can see is their rules. All they can see is what they think is wrong. Their preconception of how God's supposed to work. And so they come to him and they go, are you the one? And look how Jesus responds. He goes, hey, here's my defense. My Father's still working in me. Here's what he's saying. That God, even on the Sabbath day, God didn't stop working. He sustains the universe. He saves us. He does things. Because he's God, he's doing his work all the time. So he says, my Father's working, and I'm doing his work. Oh, this really sets him off. For this reason, they tried all the more. Now they want to kill him. Notice first he was persecuted. Now they want to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath in their mind, but he was even calling God his own Father and making himself equal to God. I mean, they're so ballistic. And Jesus knew exactly what he was saying, by the way. I mean, Jesus could have deflected in some other ways. He literally walks right up to him and he says, hey, I'm going to poke the bear. We're going to take this head on. God's working, I'm working because I'm doing the work of God. And they knew in that moment, oh man, he's making God his Father. He's making himself out equal to God. And that's exactly what he was doing. But here's what they had missed in the process. He could make himself equal to God because he was actually doing the things that only God could do. And if they had stepped back long enough to look at the actual miracle, they would have stopped and their jaws would have dropped and they'd have gone, hey, we're actually in the presence of Messiah. But because they had their categories, because they had their preconceptions, because they knew exactly what they thought God was supposed to do, they can't even see it. They miss the marvel of it all. And if you read through these Gospels, you're going to see this over and over again. The very people that should be most excited that God is with them are the people that turn on him, are the people that persecute him. The people in this passage, they want to kill him. And ultimately they will. He's a powerful man. And it was hard enough to get him out of the house, much less to a notary. I didn't know anybody to call. All I knew is right down by the Publix grocery store, there was a little UPS store, and they would notarize there. And so I went down and through it. At this point, he had alcohol dementia, and there was a lot of paranoia. When I pulled out legal papers, he was real skeptical. And all during that day, I kept talking to him, and we actually went to the UPS store 3 times. And I'd get him to a place where he would get in it, and then you'd just see this wave of distrust come over him. It was just like he was gone. And he'd go, "What do you want me to sign? You're trying to take my money, aren't you?" "No, I'm not doing this." And he'd go out to the car. And a few hours later, I took him back to the UPS store. The thing that you can do. There's this place in Scripture where God wants us to be desperate. So desperate we realize we need him. And we have to humble ourselves before him. The second question I'd ask you, are you willing to take him at his word and do what he says? In both these stories, Jesus gives a direct command. He tells the one official, he says, "Hey, I'm not going with you, but I want you to go. And you just trust me." And the guy goes. The guy who's laid there for 38 years, he looks at him, he says, "Hey, here's what I'm telling you. Get up. It's time to get up and pick up the mat." And the guy trusts him. And he obeys. And again, it may seem too simplistic, but I'm telling you, part of these stories is just learning, do we just trust Jesus at his word? Do we just trust what he's telling us? Do you just trust him enough to actually obey Scripture as it applies to your life? To actually apply it to your life when it comes to your finances. And you trust him enough with it that you'll obey like Mike Anderson, no matter what it means. Do you trust him enough with your dating life? Do you trust him enough with your marriage? Do you trust him enough with your sex life? Do you trust him enough with forgiving someone? Do you take Jesus at his word and trust him? Do you trust him when he asks you to step out by faith? To do something that maybe he's not asking anybody else, but he's asking you to trust him. One of the emails I got about miracle stories is a young woman in our church. And she wrote about when she was in college a few years ago. She felt like God was really telling her that on the Sabbath, on Sunday, that she wanted to honor it, to really make it a day of rest, to make it what God had designed. Not put a bunch of rules on it, but she made a commitment before God. She said, "You know what? I'm not going to do my schoolwork on Sunday. I'm just going to give that to you." And it seemed fine until one weekend she came up to it and she had this paper she was working on, and she literally worked on it till midnight Saturday night. And she said, "Am I going to live up to this commitment or not?" She goes, "Yeah, I think God's calling me to. I'm going to trust him." And she didn't work on it on Sunday. Got up early Monday, tried to finish it, but wasn't finished. She's walking to class with this unfinished paper. She knows it's not going to be good. She's like, "All right, Lord, you're just telling me to let go." As she walks up to the class, she sees a note there. The class has been canceled for today. Hey, you may think it's a coincidence. I don't. In fact, just a few weeks later, she found herself on another weekend, another paper. With all that she had going on, she had a full load, she had a busy schedule with that. And again, she was struggling. Can I get this paper finished? And she couldn't if she was going to honor her commitment on that Sunday. And Monday morning, she's walking to class, and again, she doesn't have her paper, and she's really hoping, "All right, God, are you going to cancel the class? Are you going to cancel the class?" Class wasn't canceled. She went and she sat on the back row. Everybody starts handing their papers in. In fact, one of her friends looks over and says, "You didn't do your paper?" And she's so embarrassed in that moment. And she's like, "Okay, God, you're obviously teaching me a lesson about grades or something." And right then the professor speaks up and he goes, "This paper was a really hard assignment, wasn't it? You guys want some more time?" "Yeah, I'm going to give you, hey, push the papers back. Y'all take some more time. you can turn it in later. We don't have to turn them in today. And again, in just that moment, God shows up. Now, you may write it off as coincidence. You know what I ascribe it to? It's not this massive miracle. Life was saved or anything else. But let's face it, God. Let's face it, folks. No miracles are big to God. And God decides in that one day for a young woman who said, hey, God, I think you're leading me in this, and I want to take you at your word. I want to trust you with it. And God shows up. Final question I'd ask you today. And this one I really want you to ask yourself. Are you open to letting go of your preconceptions of how God works so that you can actually experience the work of God? Are you open? Because I think a lot of people have a preconception. In fact, I think most people walking on the planet, some of you have a preconception, there is no God. And so you look at these stories and it doesn't match your worldview, doesn't match the way you think the planet works, and you just write it off. Some of you've got a conception of God, but can he really work in these kind of ways? Can he work in dynamic ways? Can he still show up today? And you're quick to dismiss it. You're quick to not look at it. In fact, a lot of us in church, even in Bible church, we get a little uncomfortable with miracles. I think we kind of see the ways that it's abused out there. I see some of the health and wealth preachers. I see people, they kind of do those campaigns, and there's parts of it really turns me off. And I can, in my own flesh, kind of pull back from it that I don't want to be associated with that at all. But you know what I can do in that? I can start creating these preconceptions of how God works and doesn't work. And I think we can miss out on what he wants to do. See, guys, we serve a God who, when he walked on this planet, and by the way, he walked on this planet in time and space, and he did these events, and he did these miracles, and he did them with witnesses, and he gave us a written transmission in history of it, because he's trying to blow some of our preconceptions that he really did what he said he did. He really accomplished it. And if you've never investigated it, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're letting your preconceptions keep you from seeing the greatest miracle in all of human history, the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He still works today. And if you're like me and you're a follower of Jesus, here's what I'd encourage you to do. Open your eyes more. Open your heart more. We keep from being in pain, but he sat up to give his seat to Raul. And Raul sat down as they started talking together. Mark said, out of their team, Adam was the only one that was fluent in Spanish. And so he was able to have a conversation. His seat just happened to be open. As they started talking, Raul opened up pretty quickly. And he told Adam that he had tried to commit suicide the day before. He literally had tied a cinder block around his feet and was about to throw himself into the water to commit suicide. His wife of 30 years had just left him, and he was despondent. And Adam sat there listening to him, and he could understand. He said, I know exactly how you feel. A few years ago, my wife of 15 years left me, and I almost committed suicide. Raul prayed in Spanish with Adam, one of the few guys that could share Christ with him. And he found Christ that day to show us how much he loves us and how much he cares. Will you pray with me? Father, I do thank you. I thank you for Raul and Adam. I thank you for Connie. I thank you for meeting me in a UPS store in my desperation. I thank you for the miracle that each of us that know you has experienced, the miracle of life change, the miracle that Jesus would die and rise again for us. Lord, I pray for anybody, maybe they're listening to this, they've been skeptical till today. Lord, would you give them a heart to believe, to trust? that you really do show up like this, that you really did do this. Lord, I pray for maybe somebody today who they've known you, but they don't really believe you're alive and active. Would you open their eyes today? God, we want to be a church where we're seeing miracles. Not in the way we would.
God has spoken to you in a special way during this service, and you'd like someone to pray for you, click on the request prayer link. A member of our prayer team will join you in a private chat room to pray with you. If you're watching on demand, you can share your praise report or prayer requests with us at venture.cc/prayer. We look forward to praying with you. Thank you again for joining us today. Invite a friend and join us next weekend for week 3 of our series, Marvel. God bless you and have a great week.